Good evening. Thanks for being here. I'm Troy Charles, and here are your top stories. The Thunder Bay Botanical Conservatory has been short-staffed due to COVID-19. The greenhouse has 10,000 extra plants in their greenhouse that need to be planted in the city flower beds, which both the mayor and city manager insist will happen. Avery McCrae has more.
The city's greenhouse has been under some stress due to COVID-19. The greenhouse is without its seasonal employees, which have led to the current staff to work 12-hour shifts 6 days a week to tend for the plants. The conservatory currently holds 10,000 plants, with some being kept at Lakehead University's greenhouse. Seasonal employees are the ones who plant the flowers in the city flower beds, and it is unsure at this time when they will return to work. Mayor Bill Morrow says the reason the flowers are not planted yet has nothing to do with COVID-19.
I think the answer there is pretty simple, that the weather has not been good. And if we weren't in COVID-19, those plants weren't going to be out in the flower beds yet anyway. And so I think now that a number of these restrictions have been removed, you'll see workers called back. And I don't think there's going to be much of a difference in terms of when these flowers will have been planted in either regard.
The staff currently has 2 workers who can plant the city's flower beds. The greenhouse by this point normally has an additional 5 employees to help out with the busy time of year. The city has begun to recall and redeploy their staff with COVID restrictions lifting in the province, but it is unknown on how the conservatory will be impacted. City Manager Norm Gale intends for all the flowers to be planted when appropriate.
So we will be planting those plants, but let's be clear that those plants are still in the conservatory. Is not about COVID-19. It's been cold. And if there was no COVID-19, those plants wouldn't be planted today. Although there would be more staff there, obviously. COVID-19 did mean that there's fewer staff. We intend to plant those flowers.
Avery McCrae, TBT News.
One individual has been transported to hospital with non-life-threatening injuries after a collision with a transport truck earlier today on Highway 102. The accident led to a temporary closure of the highway between Mapleward and Town Line Roads, but has since reopened. There are no additional details at this time. Meanwhile, a man has passed away in Fort Albany First Nation after being struck by a motor vehicle in the James Bay community. Anishinaabe Police Service and EMS responded to the scene early Saturday morning. The victim was rushed to hospital but had succumbed to his injuries. NAPS, with help from the OPP, are investigating the incident. Now, testing for COVID-19 remains a top priority for many governments and organizations, including Riverside Healthcare in the Rainy River District. The healthcare operates 3 medical centers in Fort Frances, Emo, and Rainy River, respectively, as well as the long-term care facilities and the COVID-19 assessment centers in those communities. This week, Riverside began running a trial of drive-through testing for residents in addition to having people enter the assessment centers. Julie Loveday is the Vice President of Clinical Services at Riverside Healthcare. She says there's a likelihood of bringing the drive-through testing back later on as it provides a safer environment for staff, patients, and those being tested for the virus inside the facilities.
However, we'll see how this 7 days goes, and we'll take a good look at the volume we had, what kind of clients and community members we served with the testing. And then we'll make a decision from there. But definitely, we really want to keep these risk patients out of the facility, out of the hospital, where there's a high volume of vulnerable people there.
For the last 21 days, there have been no new cases of COVID-19 in the Rainy River and Kenora districts, and the total number of cases sits at 16, all of which have been resolved. When COVID-19 was first declared a pandemic, thousands of businesses had to close their doors, including movie theaters. But in several communities across the Northwest, people have found a way to get together with a nostalgic cinema experience. Adam Riley has the story.
During a normal summer, Ashley Barker and her family would often gather with friends in their backyard in Eagle River, west of Dryden, and watch a movie using a projector and a laptop. But then 2020 and the COVID-19 pandemic happened.
Since we can't do that this year, my mom and her help of Pinterest convinced my dad that we should have a drive-in here so that we can still invite our family and friends over to entertain ourselves.
Using reservations through a Facebook group, Barker has hosted around a dozen vehicles in her driveway during movie nights, projecting the video onto a large screen and transmitting the audio through a small FM transmitter. She says the popularity of the drive-in has been a hit with a certain demographic.
My grandparents' generation and people who probably remember those drive-in days as a really good memory. And I mean, I'm old enough to remember the drive-in, so it brought back a lot of really fun memories.
Meanwhile, in Rainy River, a similar drive-in experience is underway as well. Marty Krieger is with the Railroad Days Committee, a yearly festival that so far has not been canceled as a result of COVID-19. Like Barker, he has acquired an FM transmitter, but for the screen and location, he has different plans.
We're going to do a trial run here, hoping the screen's big enough. We're actually going to mount it on the back of my tow truck to get it up a little height, try out the sound, find location. Like, there's a lot of, we don't want to get in trouble with the government either.
Krieger says the drive-in has got many people in town buzzing with support, even Mayor Deb Ewald, who says it's not the first time something like this has been attempted in Rainy River.
Will you go out to catch a flick if it comes?
Oh, definitely. Actually, quite a few years ago now, we actually had a drive-in bingo, which was kind of interesting. And I know that because I actually shared the jackpot, so it was a win-win for me. But no, I think, you have to try different things.
Adam Riley, TBT News.
Canada's Rural and Northern Immigration Pilot Project, which Thunder Bay was selected to be part of, continues to move forward in spite of COVID-19. The program matches up to 100 foreign workers interested in moving to our city with local employers. Community Economic Development Commission CEO Eric Zakruski says it's great for the local economy as well as the cultural diversity. At least 25 matches have been made thus far, and the CEDC hopes to have an update for City Council over the summer.
These are jobs that local Thunder Bay businesses and employers have come to us under the program and said, for years, we cannot fill these 5 positions. It's positions that we know are in short supply or they're in over demand, like PSWs. These folks that are eligible under the program, they move to Thunder Bay, they've got kids they put in school, they get out and they become part of our economy. The way the program's designed is that, they need to stay. That's one of the key factors, is they can't come here, get their permanent residency, and then all of a sudden leave Thunder Bay.
The Lakehead District School Board is proposing a revised dress code policy that leaves less room for interpretation of what's appropriate for students to wear. The current policy was last revised in 2012 and referred to guidelines and expectations. The new version, drafted for consideration by trustees at their meeting this past week, is much more precise. The new policy mandates that clothing does not include references to cannabis, alcohol, drugs, or promotion or incitement of violence or criminal activities. Superintendent of Education Michelle Probazanski highlights some other noticeable differences from the past policy.
I think if somebody was looking at the dress code now and comparing it to the way it would have been before, they would see more of an anti-oppressive lens, that our students have the ability to express themselves and do not feel that there's any inequality between being a male or a female in our schools, and that it adheres very strictly to the Human Rights Code.
Policy changes have been presented to the Board of Trustees. They now have time to review and ask any questions before they decide on approval at the next regular board meeting on May 26. When Premier Doug Ford announced on May 1st that auto dealerships could open up their showrooms by appointment only, it was the first time in nearly 2 months that car dealerships started to see a rise in car sales and appointments. For Badani Motors on Memorial Avenue, their showroom remains taped off, but their front door is now unlocked in an encouraging step for the auto industry. A strict process has been put in place to ensure the safety and staff and clientele with the ongoing coronavirus pandemic.
You're interested in, we pull it up to an area in the back. We completely disinfect all the surfaces inside the vehicle along with the door handles on the exterior, and then we allow the customer to go on the test drive or do their showing with still a 6-foot gap between us, obviously. And then when the vehicle comes back, we do the same thing. We disinfect the interior, all the door handles, and so it makes the sales process a little bit longer, but it also allows us to control the environment for the safety of the customer and the employee.
The parts counter remains closed to walk-ins, but over-the-phone orders can be placed with a no-contact pickup system in place. Nothing has changed on the service side, with appointments still available for anyone who may need one. Joined here once again by good friend Mike Mohorich. Mike, golfing's back in action in Thunder Bay and on the pro scale.
Back-to-back nights of highlights. That fires me up. We got all the highlights, golf and soccer, after the break.